Warriors of Khazad Doom!
Dedicated servers are here. This is going to be a pretty long video, so go ahead and grab a drink, a snack, and sit back and relax. This is focused towards people who have zero idea what they're doing. If you're a more advanced user, this probably isn't the video for you. I highly recommend following along as we go through this process, especially if you're new to this whole thing. We're going to be covering what a dedicated server is and is not, the difference between a dedicated server and a P2P server, how to set up the server after you obtain the files, some configuration options, how to import an existing world, configuring a server that's currently running, configuring an existing server, and some basic firewall and port forwarding demonstrations. I will not be covering how to obtain the files, scripts including Steam CMD, mods, different hosting providers, Linux, Docker, other setups other than Windows, and anything that was added after this video was recorded. Who is this video meant for? This is meant for anyone trying to set up a Return to Moria server. It might be your first time self-hosting, or maybe you're having some sort of issue. I highly recommend joining the Discord. There's a lot of very knowledgeable people on there who are more than willing to help you with any issues you may be having. I'll have a few links in the description. I'll have a link to the Discord, I'll have a link to the official documentation, and the official link to submit a ticket if you have any issues. So what is a dedicated server? A dedicated server allows the server to be accessible at all times. You don't need a host player to stay logged in for others to join the server. It needs to be hosted on a PC. You cannot host it on a console. There are various hosting providers you can utilize. Anyone with a join code, the IP port, or a domain name and the port number can join your server. There is an option for passwords, so if you do want to protect your server even further, you can utilize that. The server will pause if there's 0 players online, and the sleep cycle currently works like a normal peer-to-peer server, meaning all players need to sleep for the sleep cycle to occur. So what can this dedicated server not do? A dedicated server has a hard cap of 8 players per the devs. This won't be increased. This means up to 8 players can be connected at the same time, but there's no limit to how many in total can be connected on the server. A good example of this would be a warehouse server. Up to 8 players can be connected at the same time, however, anyone can come and go as they please. Unfortunately, there is no in-game server list. You will need the join code, the IP address, or the domain name to join the server, and obviously the password if one's configured. This is made easier by a new addition of Session History, where you can see the previous servers you've joined so you don't have to enter this information every time. Alright, first things first, you're going to have to download the files. Like I said, I won't be covering how to actually obtain the files due to a current bug with Steam, but once Steam gets fixed, you'll be able to go to Steam and you will find it in your list of tools. Mine says games up here just for this demonstration. It's a little different than yours, you can just ignore it. After you have the files downloaded through Steam, you're probably going to want to move them somewhere else so it's not actually running through Steam. To do that, you're going to right-click on the server, go to Manage, Browse Local Files. After you do that, you should see a window like this. These are the actual server files. What you're going to want to do is click Common, right-click on it, copy, and paste it somewhere of your choosing. For this demonstration, we'll be putting it on the desktop, just because it'll be a little easier. Alright, now that we have it on the desktop, we're going to go and open it up. And the first thing we're going to do is run the application. Because this is a fresh install of Windows, we're going to get this error message. The easiest way to resolve this is to run a game on Steam, and it'll install the required packages. So if you're like me and you're running this in the VM, you're not going to be able to run a game on Steam. You probably don't have a GPU on your VM. If you do, great, might work that way. If not, in the description I'll have a link to the runtimes you'll need to download and install. Super simple, you're just going to go to the link, download those applications. The web setup for DirectX is fine, run that. And I don't know which version of C++ runtimes the game uses. I just found this all-in-one that I use. You can double-click install all. It'll run through and just install everything and just follow the prompts. Once that's complete, you can navigate back to the Return to Moria server. And you can run the application. And a black window should pop up. This is what we're going to call the console moving forward. Notice it just says it created the configuration file and the rules file. Closing server, press any key. That's good, you want that. Go and just press any key to close as instructed. Once that's complete, in order to run the server, you're going to have to configure it. We're going to open this Moria server config file, and we're going to go through some of these options real quick. Optional password, you can put some text in here if you want to put a password on your server. In the world field, we have a couple different options. The name field is going to be the name of the world, and the optional world file name is going to be used if you want to have a specific save file that the server uses. If you're going to be importing an existing server, I recommend using the optional world file name. It makes it a little easier. You can use the name. You just need to make sure the name exactly matches what it shows in the game when you try to access the world. If you're creating a new world, you can name this whatever you want. So for example, if I wanted to make test world, we'll just name it test world. Scrolling down, we have the world create section. This section only applies to newly created worlds. This means if you import an existing save, it's not going to take any effect with any of these settings. You have the type field. You can specify if it's going to be a campaign or a sandbox world. You have the seed. You can specify what seed number you want. Otherwise, just leave it as random. Down here, we have specific difficulty options based on the custom setting. If you set the difficulty preset to custom, you'll be able to adjust these. It's important to note that it does say very high here and very low here for some of these, but they don't actually all work at very high or very low. Some of them only work at high, for example, and not very high. In the description, if you look at the link to the official dedicated server documentation, it'll show you the different options that are available. Scrolling down here a little bit, we have the host section. You're going to have the listen address. As stated here, you're just going to leave this blank. This is the listen port. This is the port you're going to have to forward through your router to allow people outside your network to connect to you. The default is 7777. You could change it to anything you want. Be aware 7777 is a pretty common port number for game servers, so you may wish to change it to something else if you are hosting other game servers. For this demonstration, I'm going to leave it at 7777. Next up, we have the advertise address. You're just going to leave this as auto. You can change it if you absolutely need to, but otherwise just leave it as auto. If you want to have a LAN server only, you can set it to local instead of auto. Otherwise, just leave it auto. Next, we have the port reported to clients, advertise port. Just leave it blank. There's no reason to use this unless you have a very specific setup, in which case you should already know what this means. Underneath that, we have the initial connection retry time. This is how long the server is going to attempt to create a server if it's unable to do so. You can just leave it at the default of 120. I don't really see any need to change it unless you have some kind of weird issue. And next we have the after disconnection retry time at 600. You can leave this at 600 as well. This just tells the server how long it should try to create a new server if it loses connection to Epic servers. Due to how the server is currently set up, it is required to have a connection with Epic servers. Even if you're using a local IP address, the console will crash and shut down the server if it's not able to make that connection. And rounding it off here, we have the console. You're probably going to leave this as true. That way the window pops up and you can see what's on it. If you're a more advanced user, you can set it to false to disable the console. However, to do the initial configuration, I at least recommend leaving it as true. And down here we have the performance section. We have server FPS at 60. This isn't your traditional FPS like what you're usually used to. It's more of a tick rate. Just leave it at 60. There's really no benefit to increase it. If your PC is struggling to host the server, you might want to lower it down to 30, but otherwise just leave it at 60. And this is a new one that was added to the dedicated server. Loaded area limit. This just tells the server how many areas it's allowed to leave loaded. The default's 12. The idea behind this is it can help reduce load walls. Those are those black walls with all the white little dots on them. If you increase this number, it'll put more strain on the server, should allow more areas to stay loaded, causing less load walls. Should probably leave this at 12 unless you have issues, in which case you might want to bump it up a little bit, or if you have a weaker machine, you might want to bump it down a little bit. There are some basic guidelines up here you can read. From here, we're going to go and import an existing world, but in order to do that, we do need to run the console one more time to generate the remaining files and folders that we need. So we'll run the application. And hopefully you'll see a pop-up that looks like this. If you see this pop-up, it makes it super easy. You won't have to do any additional configuration on the Windows firewall. Just click allow, and that'll allow it through your firewall. Now that that's loaded, we can see a couple things that are important on here. We have the created new world line. This tells us that it created a new world instead of loading an existing one. For this example, we want it to load an existing one, so we'll be changing that in a minute. We can see it did start hosting the server. We have our join code here that we can share with our friends. We have the IP and port number that we can share with our friends as well. There are some commands down here we can use. We'll get into those a little bit later. But for right now, all we're going to do is type exit to get out of the console, hit enter. It'll take a second to close the server, and it's closed. From here, we're going to move on to how to import an existing world. It only works if the save game's on PC. It doesn't work if it's on a console. It'll be slightly different if you're playing on Epic versus Steam. I use Steam, but I'll be showing you both ways. Pretty simple. First thing you're going to do is locate the actual save file. The easiest way to do this is to open Run. On Windows, you hold down Windows key and press R. It'll open up this little Run window. You can type this command in. I'll have it in the description below. Go and press enter. It'll open up this folder. In here, it'll say Save Games Steam or Save Games Epic, depending which one you have. Since I have Steam, I'm going to double click on it for Steam, and you'll see a folder that looks like this. You'll notice there's a couple different options in here. You have MA, MC, or MW. The one we're after is MW. That's the world file. A and C are for other things. Notice there's two different types of files. There's back files and save files. We need the save file. So to import our save, we're going to find the save file that we want. For example, let's say we want this one down here. We're going to copy it. So you can right click copy or control C. We'll copy that, bring it over to our dedicated server. We're going to go to Moria, saved, save games dedicated. And in here, we'll have the two files that the server just created by itself. We have the save file and backup. For this case, we don't want to create a new world. We're going to delete them. And we're going to paste in the one that we copied. All right, now that that's pasted in there, we need to tell the server that that's the save file we want to use. So what we're going to do is click on it. We can right click and rename or press F2. Copy the world name. Go back to our file here. We're going to get rid of the name we have here for test world. Since we're loading a specific file name, we're going to put it in there. And make sure you have the .sav at the end. Then you're going to save this. You can press Control S to save or go to File, Save. And then now, when you go back into the server and run it, you can notice it says using world with file name as defined in the config, selected the armory, and it created the server. So now we have a running server based on the file that we imported. There's still a few more things you'll probably want to do before you play on your server. First one is edit the rules. This isn't an actual rules file, probably what you're thinking of. This is just a message that appears on the screen when people attempt to join your server. So for example, we'll put hello world. Now when people join our server, they'll get a pop-up that says hello world. The other thing in here are the permissions. In the Moria server permissions.txt file, there's a bunch of different things you can do. This is where you would manually block players. They give you some really good examples down here. So for example, if you wanted to block the player named Durin, you can copy, put it down here, and Durin-blocked. If you wanted to block a player named Patrick, for example, you would just put Patrick, and now Patrick would not be able to join once you save this. You can also adjust the build and storage options. In this instance, the default is set to all construction and all storage. This means that anyone who joins your server will be able to build and access any player built storage. You can specify this player by player. For example, up here they have Gimli. Gimli has all construction, all storage. There's a few different options you can utilize. There's no construction, quick build, all construction, no storage, all storage. You can read the examples there and apply it as needed. Next, I'll have to do some simple port forwarding. This is really scary for a lot of people who haven't done it before. It looks super complicated. I'll make it as easy as possible though. First thing you need to do is access your router's configuration. If you don't know how to do that, go to your search bar down here, type in cmd, open command prompt. You're going to type in ipconfig /all and press enter. I'll have this command in the description as well. So what we need to find is our default gateway. So what we need to find is what's called our default gateway. In our instance, it's 192.168.0.1. So we can copy that. Yours may be different. If you already know what it is, go ahead and bring up your router settings. Go ahead and make a note of what your default gateway is. You'll also need to make a note of what your IPv4 address is. Go ahead and copy that somewhere or write it down. We'll need that in a minute. The other thing we'll need to know is in the configuration for the server. We just need to remember what the port number was that we used. Down here in listen port, it's 7777 by default. If you left it as default, great. If you use something else, that's fine too. Just make sure you write it down. Now we're going to go ahead and access our router to do the port forwarding. You're going to type in the default gateway that you had. And it'll prompt you to sign in. Go ahead and do so. Alright, now that you're logged in your router, yours may look different than mine. If you have an ASUS router, perfect. It'll be relatively close, if not exactly the same. What you're looking for is a section called port forwarding or port triggering. You want to make sure you're in the forwarding portion of it if there is a triggering section. In this router, we're going to go down to WAN. And at the top, we'll have virtual server /port forwarding. Sorry about all the bars on the screen, but I do have to block out some sensitive information. In this router, you want to make sure enable port forwarding is enabled, and we're going to click add profile. In add profile, we're going to go ahead and type in the service name. You can name it whatever you want, doesn't matter. And protocol, you want this to be UDP. External port is going to be the port number that we had in our config file. For example, we had 7777. Internal port should be optional. You can leave it blank. If it does require you to put it in there, just put 7777 again, or whatever the port was. The internal IP address is going to be that one we noted earlier. In my case, 227. And the source IP address should be optional. Just leave it blank. After that, go and click OK. And that'll forward the port. If you don't understand what that just did, that just basically allows any connection from outside your network to access the server without the server reaching out to them first. This is required if you want other people to play on your server from outside of your local area network. Due to how this server is configured, you will also need to forward the port in order for yourself to be able to access your own server if you're self-hosting it. Alright, we're back here in the Windows 11 VM. The reason I'm in here now is I just wanted to show you Windows Firewall in case you do run into an issue. We're just going to go start menu, type in firewall. We're going to go to firewall and network protection. And down at the bottom, we're going to go to advanced settings. You'll get a pop-up, click yes. And this window will open. Once you have this window open, we're just making sure traffic's not going to be blocked. So we're going to go to inbound rules, click anywhere, type in Moria. You can see that it is not being blocked. It's green. And you can see it says any all the way along there. So that's good. Under outbound rules, it shouldn't have anything on there. Same thing, click anywhere, type in Moria, nothing pops up. Great. Now, if you did have an issue with it being blocked, you want to make sure inbound traffic's allowed. You go in here, click new rule, follow the prompts, and get it set up. If you have any issues with this, join the Discord and someone can help you out with it. So you now have a functioning server. Great. Go ahead and open it, make sure it launches. Once it's open, there's a few commands you can use down here in the console. The first one is help. This will show you the other commands you can use. You can block players or unblock players. One important thing to note is the block command is case sensitive with the player's name. So if the player has a capital first letter in their name, you have to use a capital first letter or else it won't work properly. You can kick players, you can exit the server, you can list all the currently connected players, you can regenerate the invite code, you can change the world name, and you can adjust difficulty settings. For a full list of commands, reference the website linked in the description. Here we are in the game. There's 3 ways to join the server. First way is with the invite code. Click search. It'll appear. The server should appear. Type in the password and click join. This screen will pop up. This is the rules.txt file. You can click OK. And it'll load you in the server. While this loads, there's a couple important notes about known issues. Sometimes the server can get stuck while it's loading a world, but it'll load immediately if you switch focus to the console and press any key. So if you go to the black console window, click in it, press any key, it should load faster. Here we are on the server. Everything seems to be working fine. Great. Now from the main menu, there's a couple other ways we can join the server. We're going to use this new advanced join options button. In here we can use a domain and a port number, or an IP address and a port number, along with the password. If you are hosting the server on the same machine you're using to play the game on, you can just enter the port number down here in the password and it should work. So for example, since we're hosting locally on the same network, we can type in the local IP address and the port number. It's really important for the port number, you have this colon between the IP address and the port number. Same thing if you have a domain, you would have the colon after the domain name. Type in the password and join server. And again, we should see the rules.txt here. And here we're in the server again. Now we're connected locally. You'll have better stability and less ping if you're connecting on the same local area network. It's important to bear in mind that IP address will not work for other people outside your network. They'll still have to use your join code or your external IP address to join. Thanks for watching. You should have a fully functioning server now. If you do have any questions, or maybe I missed something in the video, definitely hop in the Discord. Someone in there can help you out. I'll have links in the description, including the official dedicated server setup guide, a link to the Discord, some of the commands that we used in this video, and some other information.